With May 26th being World Dracula Day and Bram Stoker's original novel turning 125 years old today, I figured now would be a good time to make a quick video talking about two of my favorite versions of the character in movies, with those coming from the silent German film Nosferatu and Bela Lugosi's portrayal of the Count from Universal Studios in 1931. Not only are these two films super significant to me personally, which I'll get to in a minute, but they're also insanely influential to the horror genre and the cinematic medium as a whole. When talking about movies, I normally don't care for the phrase "they don't make them like they used to anymore" because it's commonly used to degrade and dismiss today's films that people don't like, and I feel like that's just a really lazy narrative, but in some cases, with these two being examples, it is true. You couldn't make these movies today and have the same effect. I truly feel like a big reason that they have the tone and atmosphere that they do is because of the time they were released and the technology that was available at the time. The two biggest technological disadvantages that actually helped these films in hindsight were the lack of access to sound equipment and color film. Of course, with some silent movies, certain transfers had color tinting and Nosferatu was no exception, as you can see here, and Universal's Dracula was the first sound horror film. But as part of that adjustment process, there was such an emphasis on recording the actors during shooting that there was no music used in the film at all. The only time we hear any music is during the opening titles, which, by the way, how perfect was it to use the Swan Lake theme during the opening credits? It works so well, and to this day, I always attribute that theme to Dracula more than the actual play it was made for. Just listen to this. So because there wasn't any music in the rest of the movie, in sequences when there wasn't any dialogue being spoken, there was just a long stretch of silence with nothing to fill the void from an audio standpoint. And this doesn't hurt the film like some people might expect it to. If anything, it's better without music because the silence just enhances the chilling ambience that the set design creates, and the two factors complement each other really well, and together they create a tone that can't be replicated in today's industry. And let's get to the cast too. Everybody here does an amazing job, from Dwight Frye as Renfield to Helen Chandler as Mina Seward, but of course the two that stick out to me the most are Edward Van Sloan as Professor Van Helsing, and of course Bela Lugosi as the Count himself. They do well in their own scenes, but my favorite parts of the whole film are the scenes that they have together because there's a tension between them that can be felt as soon as they first connect on screen, almost like they knew each other in a past life or something like that. It's the perfect personification of the film's science versus superstition themes, and it's just really cool to see it play out the way it does. A big contributing factor to their on-screen chemistry could be that before this film, they both had experience playing their respective roles on Broadway and even worked with each other on stage in that time, but whatever the case is, it translates beautifully on film, and it wouldn't have been the same with a different cast. Furthermore, I still believe to this day that Lugosi is the ultimate Dracula, and nobody will ever be able to top his performance. Not Christopher Lee, not Gary Oldman, and definitely not Nicolas Cage in this new Renfield movie that's coming out next year, which is a different conversation for a different day. My point is, Lugosi is the king, and over 90 years later, nobody's even come close to being as iconic as him. Something that's almost become synonymous with the character is Lugosi's Hungarian accent, and I think I read somewhere or heard something that said around the time Dracula was being filmed, Lugosi's English was very much a work in progress, and the only words he knew were the lines from the scripts that he was given, which would explain the sort of broken cadence to his speech, like this scene right here.
This is very old wine. I hope you will like it.
Now, if he was playing someone like Jonathan Harker or one of the other characters, it probably wouldn't work that well, but for Dracula, it's perfect because it makes him sound a little more cryptic and ominous, which falls perfectly into place with that character. His performance, along with the strong supporting cast, makes for a really intriguing and entertaining watch, and it's really easy to get invested in what's happening as the film progresses. By today's standards, some people might think it's a little slow, but you know what they say, patience is a virtue, and at the very least, this film should be respected and appreciated as a milestone in horror and an important example in early sound cinema. Now let's go even further back to before sound was in movies with Nosferatu. Nosferatu was made in Germany, had its domestic release there in 1922, it didn't come to the States until 1929, and over the years Nosferatu has been referred to as the first vampire, and the film has been credited as the first adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula novel. Now, is that true? No. However, in a way it is, because it's the oldest surviving film that we have access to today. There were two supposed adaptations that came earlier, the first one coming from Russia in 1920, but there's also a chance it's just a hoax because there's no information on it, no stills, no scripts, no testimonies, nothing. It's suggested that the film was destroyed during the Russian Civil War, but again, it might not even exist at all, so who knows. The other pre-Nosferatu film was made in Austria in 1921, and it was called Dracula's Death. There's not a lot known about the actual plot of the film, with some film historians even believing that it wasn't really much of an adaptation to begin with, and the only surviving evidence of the film's existence are these stills. Now, I have no idea what's going on in these or what their significance is to the film and its plot, but that's all I got pertaining to that. So back to Nosferatu, it's an adaptation of Stoker's novel, but the characters' names are changed because they never cleared the rights to adapt the novel from Stoker's widow Florence Stoker, and needless to say, things didn't go very well when she found out about the film being made. She was so frustrated that she demanded the destruction of every known print of the film. Of course, as we can see, some prints survived, which is why we have access to the film today. And if you want to know more context about Stoker's frustrations with Nosferatu, as well as the film's production and premiere, I did write a piece about it on my Substack page back in March for the film's 100th anniversary, so I'd recommend giving that a look, but also definitely read David J. Scowell's book, Hollywood Gothic: The Tangled Web of Dracula from Novel to Stage to Screen. Anything you ever wanted to know about Dracula, whether it's in relation to Stoker's novel, the legal dispute with Nosferatu, the stage plays in America in the 20s, or Universal's 1931 masterpiece, it's all in that book, so definitely check that out. All the links to everything will be in the description below. Now, what's interesting about Nosferatu is how unique it is to its country of origin. Nowadays in film classes and film school, this movie is used as one of the most popular examples of the German Expressionist movement, primarily because of its use of shadows, but there's also a lot of symbolism regarding the Black Plague, which obviously ravaged that region centuries before then, so to see the results of those events influence fictional narratives over 500 years later is interesting. And while most of my generation first became aware of Nosferatu from the show SpongeBob SquarePants, Nosferatu is more than just a meme, and along with Universal's Dracula, they both had a huge impact on the horror genre, cinema as an artistic medium, and even the character archetype of the vampire. As you can see, both portrayals look like polar opposites from each other, with one looking like death and the other looking like eternal life. And that's continued to be the case in vampire movies today, it's still one or the other. Nosferatu influenced the appearance of characters like Kurt Barlow from Salem's Lot and Peter from What We Do in the Shadows, and of course the suave and refined appearance of Lugosi's portrayal served as an inspiration to countless future vampire characters. I mean, there are really too many to keep track of, just look at any other vampire movie and you'll see what I'm talking about. And like I said, as a fan, these two movies mean a lot to me personally. I have several DVD copies of both movies, and the walls in my room have posters and memorabilia in just about every corner. The first book I ever bought to learn about the horror genre back when I was in the 3rd grade had Dracula on the cover, and on top of that, these were the two films that turned me into a hardcore fan of the genre. The first horror movie I ever saw was Jaws when I was around 7 or 8 years old, and it terrified me, which is a whole other video in its own right. But I still had a big interest in monsters, so after seeing other movies like Gremlins and Little Shop of Horrors later on, I still felt the need to learn more about horror movies, but to go back to the beginning. At the time, these two were the oldest films I came across, so with my curiosity piqued, I saw Nosferatu when I was around 10 or 11, and then Universal's Dracula not too long after, and from then on I was hooked. Reading so much about them and then seeing the films themselves gave me an appreciation for the classics that I didn't have before then, and that's a feeling that stayed with me to this day. I always recommend the Universal monster movies when someone's trying to get into horror. Nosferatu's a mainstay in my DVD player, and whenever someone asks me what my favorite movie is, Dracula is almost always one of the first ones that comes to mind. And with them being one of my earliest introductions, to me, whether it's Bela Lugosi or Max Schreck, Dracula isn't just a vampire or a character, but Dracula is synonymous with the horror genre itself. So that's everything I've got for this video. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. If you liked it, then drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to hear more from me, check out my Substack page where I talk more about horror movies and rock music, my two favorite things, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DeadNoiseBlog for more memes and discussions. Until the next video, stay tuned and stay scared.